Hey, friends, you've probably seen in the news lots of big names. Hillary Clinton, George Soros, what is being called the largest political scandal of our times. At the same time, we're seeing the Supreme Court ruling on some really, really important issues regarding redistricting. We're trying to deal with an illegal immigration crisis and right that. All of this, though, I want you to see the underlying issues under all these issues is just raw political power. This is a problem, and it's something that a Christian worldview directly addresses. So we're going to talk about that today. In addition to that, I want to talk about what looked like a massive victory for the sanctity of life. When we saw Roe v. Wade fall, what an incredible moment that was. But what's interesting is abortions have not declined in America. They've actually gone up. And we're going to talk about the reasons behind that and what we can hope for in the future as we work towards a sanctity of life culture. And then finally, we're seeing a lot of Western countries pushing for a two-state solution and actually working with Hamas. I make my view on that really, really clear, and what I believe is a Christian view really, really clear in the podcast today. And lastly, the New York Times has come out with a very, very disturbing redefinition of when a person actually dies, and the goal behind all of this is so that they can harvest more organs. I mean, we're living in a very, very sick world today. We're going to talk about that on our podcast, and of course, we're going to talk about the hope that is in Jesus Christ. You're going to love this podcast.
Hey, welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast.
Man, we are glad to be with you guys. What another Thursday morning. Actually, Monday morning. Tricking you guys, but this is your Thursday morning. We have a little time warp every week. But anyway, glad that you guys are here and so much to talk about. And I wanted you to kick off. We had that podcast last week we aired with Rodney James, and such a great podcast, such a great time we had with him. I want to encourage everybody to get on our website and listen to both of his messages. Were incredibly powerful. But and then big day yesterday with Keith Tuesday and a powerful weekend we had here with our NRP School of Ministry Live weekend. We had about 20 students on campus, and that was really great. Great couple services there. But if we rewind the tape, a couple weeks ago, we were talking about what is being called the greatest political scandal of all time, and that involved the whole Russian fake dossier and everything else. I can joyfully say I have not thought about that scandal since then, because I've had too many other things on my plate. But that's why I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful that you bring the heat when I need it. So tell me what's been happening, because you've been following this in depth.
Yeah, I would say one of the reasons why this probably hasn't caught a lot of mainstreams. Number one, all the mainstream media is not talking about it because they're complicit in the whole cover-up.
Yep.
And number two is it's really, really complicated. I try to listen and study and read as much as I can, and I still don't really exactly know all the nuances.
Right.
I do know that, different material has been released by the Trump administration. First is these documents concerning the FBI and the CIA and Barack Obama, how they might be in on this whole. They basically knew that Donald Trump and Russia does not have any type of collusion. They have all kind of documents, and then they still kind of bought into this. They changed the intelligence briefing to say that here is this collusion. And
so the big issue, we've been talking about this on a lot of fronts, is the weaponization of our own government against U.S. citizens, and in this case, a duly elected president, which is like serious stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, when you can kind of round up your friends and sabotage an incoming administration who's been elected by the American people.
And I just want to say this: we're talking about Democrats right now, but whether you're a Democrat or Republican, first of all, we're kingdom people. This podcast isn't about promoting a party. This podcast is about promoting truth. This should disturb us as Americans. I don't care what side you're on. Like, if truth comes forth and the facts are here and the facts clearly show that there's been collusion and a weaponization, of our own government against us, and in this case, treason, where you're trying to undermine a duly elected president. I mean, this isn't like little stuff down here. This is the big stuff. This is the stuff that should really alarm us, because if this is allowed to go on, I mean, America as we know it will be dead and gone.
Well, you made an amazing point. And the recent document that came out implicates Hillary Clinton, the whole Steele dossier, and also somehow George Soros and the Open Society.
And we've known about him for a long time, funding all kinds of NGOs and everything else.
But it involves like the DNC's chairwoman, and then also like they were confident in league with the FBI. I mean, I don't.
Well, remember, just something as simple as you have a debate between two candidates, and the news media feeds one of the candidates a list of the questions they're going to ask. Beforehand. Yeah. That's cheating. It's illegal. But there's never any accountability on these things, and yet that right there is properly called collusion.
Right, and why is this, like you said, this is, people say, well, you guys are hashing out the past and whatnot. Well, the problem is, this is not about revenge. If this type of behavior, if it's true, I know there's allegations and whatnot, and again, it's all going to the Department of Justice, and they're the one who's going to sort through detail and see what's illegal, what's not, all those different things. But if this type of conspiracy is true, I mean, it is held unaccountable. We don't have a democracy. We don't have a republic. We don't have rule of law. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more. Like, power rules the day. Power rules the day. And to me, and we talk about this in our podcast over and over again, like when power rules the day, I don't care if you're D or R, United States of America, the world becomes hell-ish. Because to me, what is the manifestation of hell is that there is no rule of law, there's no sovereign.
Everyone does what's right in their own eyes,
in
right?
their
That's
own
what the Bible
eyes.
says.
You know, instead of disputing, instead of logic, instead of reason, instead of just discussing your issue, everyone just bring their guns and then bring their knives and bring their nuclear bombs.
Whatever it takes to retain power, you're willing to do it.
And that's a dangerous place to play.
Which brings us up to a couple, so to your point, we need to be closely watching this and praying for justice. And as we talked about on the podcast before, like accountability. The rule of law is one thing, but the rule of law has to be applied and carried out. And there needs to be consequences for, serious breaches in integrity and breaches in the law. And I hope this is the case. A whole bunch of somebodies, if this is true, need to be behind bars for a long, long time. And again, I know the people I talk with, and probably the folks you talk with, are very skeptical that that's ever going to happen, because we just have seen so little of true justice. And I think that's what happens when everything becomes politicized. When you lose the objective standard of right and wrong, and I think we can go back to something as simple as the Ten Commandments that forbids lying and cheating and stealing and covetousness and all of that. I mean, that's just the simple Ten Commandments that Western civilization was built upon. If we could just go back to the Ten Commandments and recognize what that teaches and how that orders society, we'd probably go a long way towards justice. But until then, justice is just a wax nose that gets shaped however you want to shape it, depending on who's in power. And
whoever got the biggest microphone.
Yeah, and that's a sad thing. But let's get to the second issue, because when power is all that matters, then all you care about is votes. And so part of what fueled this massive illegal invasion in our country of folks who are not citizens is the desire to bring them in, give them all kinds of benefits, and then get a whole new voting block. And that's exactly, I can't think, there's no neutral American that can just look at what happened at our border during the 4 years under the Biden administration and suggest that there wasn't some nefarious plan behind all this. This was not about justice or caring for people that have needs. This was a wide open border that allowed all kinds of folks to come into this country, many of whom are hostile to America. And it was done for one purpose. This is all about politics. This is all about power. This is all about votes. And so talk a little bit about the issue before the Supreme Court right now that could have a massive ramification in terms of shifting the number of seats, for instance, in Congress.
Yeah. And again, I'm not an expert in this, but apparently Supreme Court is considering some regulation under the civil rights law that has been interpreted so that you have minority, majority districts. So when they draw the congressional district, they have to draw a certain way. And the Supreme Court is currently in consideration to see whether this is constitutional or not. And my understanding, if they rule that this is unconstitutional, you'll release the states to actually draw districts that is just based on geography and not necessarily based on race.
Right, okay? Right. And again, I mean, there should be a clear plan to draw out districts that look, like you said, geographically designed districts, not districts that have all kinds of crazy curves and that look really like they should look pretty much like geometric shapes, rectangles, squares, parallelograms. But when you're getting districts that are really convoluted and that have been designed that way simply to give one of the parties an advantage, and let me just be clear, both parties have been guilty over the years in doing this, but there should be justice even in the drawing of maps. Mm-hmm. And right now there has not been. And let's talk about something else that's completely absurd to common sense Americans, is how in the world we would allow somebody in this country here illegally to actually be able to vote in our election. I couldn't think about it. I'm going to go to a foreign country illegally and then expect that they're going to not only allow me to vote, but give me all kinds of benefits that citizens don't even enjoy. Like, who would come up with such a wicked, crazy plan if it was not for what you and I have just talked about? It's all about power.
And globalistic power. And I would like to say, for the illegals to come in, it's not even just about voting. It's about the census, which determines how many congressional delegates, how many electoral college votes you have. There's a lot of factors.
Federal funding and all kinds of things.
Exactly. It's a lot of this that we don't really think about until someone interprets, look at the situation and say, hey, this is actually what's going on. It's really follow the money, right? Going back to following the money. But going back to the whole idea about gerrymandering, and right now there's, there's redistricting controversies. In Texas, apparently they want to redistrict, and some Democrat representatives are literally fleeing. They made a video fleeing the state of Texas.
And then I saw the same thing, and it brought back memories of not too many years ago here in the state of Indiana when all of our Democrats decided to leave Indiana and go get holed up in a motel somewhere over in Illinois. And, we talked about this. It doesn't bode well when you're the minority party and when the only thing you can do is throw a temper tantrum and flee the very people that you're there to represent and flee the very office that you're called to hold and to represent. And so because you don't have enough votes, you're going to protest by fleeing the state. I mean, this is not a good re-election campaign. I left the state for you. I abdicated my responsibility.
To protect democracy.
Yeah, to protect everything. By the way, now is to protect democracy.
But the whole gerrymandering. I don't understand all this. I heard arguments both sides. The other says the blue state's been gerrymandering for a long time now. The Republicans are just catching up. Others are saying, if you're the party that talks about, abolishing the electoral college, packing the Supreme Court, getting votes from illegals, you shouldn't really be, talking about or trying to sabotage incoming administration. You shouldn't be talking about protecting the democracy that much. Look. All these different arguments, I think there's a lot of sides to it. But again, when we're having situations in which people are fleeing because they don't want to vote, this has been so politicized, this issue. And again, my fear, take out the DNR for a second, it's just this idea that it's about power. It's about power. It's not about justice.
You and I pointed out, so we'd say, well, the purpose of the courts was that they would be politically neutral, that they would interpret law. And then we started having activist judges. We started having all these lower court judges who are acting like they're the presidents now and trying to stop what the president's trying to do. These are lower courts. And then you look even at the Supreme Court, how politicized the Supreme Court has gotten. And you just see how ugly this gets. I'm going to keep saying this, when we have no objective standard, meaning the scriptures. And it used to be, why do we swear on the Bible? Why do we make sacred vows and oaths and all these things? And why was it that early in our country, you had to be a professing believer in Jesus Christ? Because only professing believers in Jesus Christ believe that there is going to be a judgment day and there's going to be ultimate justice is played out, and whatever's done in secret is going to be exposed. And the Bible was our standard for righteousness. You can't punish evil and promote righteousness if you don't have an objective standard for what those terms mean. And so you can see why the Christian influence, as it has waned, is literally leading to just a raw power struggle where anything goes, and it's an absolute free-for-all, including the courts. I mean, this cannot be sustained for very long without a restoration of righteousness and of biblical morality and biblical justice and biblical absolutes. And how about this? Truth with a capital T. Truth that is true for everybody, no matter where you are, no matter what political stripe you have.
And so well put, because even if our side wins with power, we still lose.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need the transcendent truth to come through for everybody. And we're in such a divided nation. We serve so many different gods in this nation. So much for, one nation under God. I would say there's one nation under multiple different gods right now. That people have such we have basically civil wars within Washington, D.C., that until we get united under the God, this issue is going to get worse and worse and worse. So.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about another big issue that has huge biblical worldview implications, and that's, let's ask this question. Back when Roe v. Wade collapsed, it was a great day. Many people did not believe we would ever see that happen. And for those who care about the sanctity of life, which again impacts not just Christians, it impacts the whole cultural environment in which we live and try to raise our families and teach our children and all of that. So it was a day of rejoicing. I just received a report here from Mike Fichter, in charge of the Indiana Right to Life, and here's the data that he shares. He said back in 1984, abortions were at an all-time high in Indiana, in particular, 16,500 or so abortions. The number of abortions the year that Roe fell in 2022 dropped down to less than half of that, 7,702 abortions. And then now we have a new law in effect in Indiana, again, restricting abortion. And the data from 2024, we went from 7,000 abortions to 138. Now, again, 138 is too many, but that's a win. I mean, we're moving in the right direction. That's a significant reduction in the number of abortions that took place in our state. So it appears that Roe v. Wade and everything that followed, everything was supposed to be sent back to the states. And states like Indiana that have a conservative majority would follow suit with the powers that they've now been given, and that they would, make abortion law that reflected, the values and beliefs of Hoosiers. But what Tony Perkins is pointing out here in a opinion piece that he wrote from the Family Research Council, he said that while, first of all, let's just talk about that issue of sending it back to the states. There are many who believe that an issue like abortion, which involves, murdering children inside the womb, should not be left up to individual states, that this is of such an issue, this is a civil rights issue, this should be something that comes from the federal level and should be the law of the nation. But if we cannot agree on that, then at least send it back to where the lowest common denominator, where we're closest to government, which is our state governments, and where we have accountability and we have more relationship, let's let them fashion the law. But of course, what the left did, anticipating the potential falling of Roe v. Wade, is they circumvented the whole system. And so what's happened is, let me find where I'm talking about what they did here. The Biden administration enabled this surge by eliminating critical FDA safety protocols and refusing to enforce longstanding federal laws, including the Comstock Act, which prohibits the mailing of abortion drugs. And so right now, because of the abortion pill, mifepristone, we now have seen 930,000, roughly, to over 1 million annually, more than 2,800 abortions a day in America. In other words, we have seen a rise in abortions under the Trump administration than under the Biden administration, because he dismantled all of these protective laws that encouraged you to have to go to a doctor to receive this. If it's not something you can get over the counter, certainly not something you can get in the mail. There had to be a physician involved. And as he points out in this article, this is not a pill that comes without significant medical risks. So there, and about at least a tithe of those who use this pill have some type of serious medical complication, and women are dying. And of course, obviously, their babies are dying. So, we're looking at a win that, when you get beyond the smoke and mirrors, is not really a win at all unless we deal with this issue. And there are many right now that are encouraging President Trump, who has been a pro-life president, to do something about this, because these restrictions and FDA, restrictions need to be put back in place. The law here, the Comstock Act, needs to be enforced, and that we should not be sending life-terminating, medicines through the mail, which can be administered in the privacy of a woman's home with no accountability, no supervision, no medical involvement at all. And this is actually a wicked, wicked thing that we need to address. So I pray, with all that President Trump is dealing with right now, my prayer is that he would respond to this and restore this back to where it was, and I think that would significantly, again, slow down. But it doesn't deal with the root problem, does it? Because these are just governmental interventions trying to put the brakes on really what we're seeing in our country today. And Pastor Keith dealt with it yesterday in his sermon, talking about the Ephesian church. Yeah. We are dealing with a culture that worships sex. And when you worship sex, you're going to have unintended pregnancies. And when you have unintended pregnancies, you're going to be faced with decisions. And unfortunately, many people make a really bad decision there.
So, you got the headlines, right? We'll send it back to the States, and then you got the details. And often the details is really what I've learned. You got the headlines is for, the general public. The details for people who really need to know what's going on. And I appreciate, Perkins and you just bringing this up to say, hey, here are the actual details. Actually, there's a back door with people sending, these medicines.
Yeah, and you and I talked about this, from a political perspective, and that's what these folks are. If they're not rooted in biblical convictions, then they're politicians. And I want to give President Trump the benefit of the doubt. He's done so many good things in the area of life. But this could easily be one of those things where we say, look, hey, Roe v. Wade happened. It's back in the States. We're good to go. And we got so many other issues that we need to address. So let's not make this contentious issue at the forefront again. And that would be the political answer. But of course, we know that's not the biblical answer. And I think as the Church of Jesus Christ, our job is to keep speaking truth to power. And I know there are pastors across America, and I think as we're moving toward another celebration of the fall of Roe v. Wade coming up in January, Sanctity of Life Sunday, it's probably good that we start talking about this and rallying more troops and making this a bigger issue.
Exactly it. This battle is not over. There needs to be awareness. There needs to be prayer. But I do see more and more. It's an interesting angle, the angle that the population. So, we go back to, populism, right? We go back to, America first. Well, one of the major attack on America first is our low birth rates. Or not just America, any nation is our low birth rates. And I see that more and more on the X feed is talking about our declining replacement rates, which is like 1.6 in America, 2.1 is what you need to replace ourselves.
Basically, what it's showing you is that given time, America or any nation becomes non-existent. There's no people. There's no people in your country.
Take in immigrants from the nation, then you lose your culture. Look at what's going on in England and other European nations. So, in some ways, say that's the judgment of abortion. And it probably is true to a certain degree. But hopefully that will, with the revival in this new generation, the hunger for God, hunger for traditions, will come a generation that says, you know what, we want to have kids. Kids are a blessing.
And
kids are great.
Absolutely restoring that whole beautiful vision of family.
Yes.
What's ironic, and you pointed this out, is that if you if you are like, say, my generation, and I'm like, well, we're not going to have children, or we're only going to have one child, save Mother Earth, or whatever other ridiculous reason you come up with. Yeah. Save money. I want to live my life. Kids are a bother, blah, blah, blah. What's crazy is when you are a senior and you need the younger generation helping to care for you, pay your bills, help out your medical costs because they're so high. There's not enough workers to fund the system. And so it's ironic that the very people who either aborted or chose not to have children for whatever selfish reason, and it's not always a selfish reason, but many times in our culture it's been a selfish reason, you end up actually cutting off your source of support, which is painful irony that you didn't have enough forethought to realize people brought you into the world, and you had siblings, and you all worked, and you supported your parents. Yeah. And now because you chose not to have kids, there's no one to support the parents because you're not one. That's the irony, I think, of selfishness and sin. And you hit the nail on the head. We have got to restore the beauty of a family, the beauty of marriage. This is a cultural issue, and we can't expect the government, again, to solve an abortion issue when the deeper issue is really an issue that the church needs to be going after. And I want to say here at Living Stones, we are. I'm performing another wedding that was just put together in the last 2 weeks. This week by a couple who said, you know what, we want to make this right. We're living together. We know this is not a relationship God blesses. We want to make it right. And, I'll bend over backwards for a couple that has a sense of the fear of the Lord and a sense of urgency to do it the right way. But it really does start with changing culture, and that starts with returning to the Lord and returning to churches that are discipling people in the ways of the Lord.
And that affects more than just even population rate. It affects, our criminal justice system, because you have kids who are raised in stable families and not in single family homes. You have a mom and a dad to support them, encourage them, raise them upright. I mean, it just makes the society so much better. And I'm hoping, but I'm seeing signs of that trending of the true wealth is not having like 5 houses and 3 cars or whatever it is. True wealth is having a family who loves you and grandkids and all that stuff. I think there's return to that. So hopefully that in conjunction with our low birth rate and a pro-life message, if we can really turn the tide on
this. This is exciting. I remember a few years back, Barna and a lot of folks were coming out with a really dismal view of the future as it related to trends. And I just saw Charlie Kirk on an interview with, I believe it was Megan Basham. But he was saying that this generation is the most conservative and most Christian generation that we've seen. So what happened, I think what the pollsters sometimes don't take into account is it's sin and evil and darkness and depression and doom and gloom, which is what a demonic worldview gives you. Eventually, people go, well, I don't want this. And there's a real hunger and there's a real awakening for just what you said. I want to have a beautiful family. I want to have a great marriage. I want to have the opportunity to provide for my family in an economy that actually works. Yeah. I don't want to be told by some government bureaucrat or some health department official that I have to be locked in my apartment for the next 3 months. They got a taste during COVID of that totalitarian leftist control, top-down, heavy-handed government, and they're like, we don't want this. We don't want to be locked into our rooms at home during our senior year when we should be enjoying school with our classmates and playing our sports or whatever it is that we enjoy doing because some bureaucrat somewhere made an autocratic decision that this is going to be our life. There's been a massive awakening, and I think this is something we need to be celebrating and touting and discipling, that we don't want to go back to where we were. And while I don't look to any human as our Messiah with a little m, thank God for this last election. Thank God for the time that he's given us, because we were pedal to the metal, heading toward leftist insanity. And thank God for intervening, and thank God for the awakening that's happening in our country right now.
Yeah.
So let me mention one other thing. So sometimes we have a few critics that post things on our page, and I like to say this first of all. Like, if you're going to criticize the podcast, listen to it.
Yeah.
Like, don't just like view my summary. I throw out some meat there in the summary, and I can tell some of the comments that people make about us or about the podcast. It's like, you're not even listening to the podcast. Like, it's very unfair to criticize a podcast that you don't listen to. So we welcome critics. We welcome the healthy bantering back and forth of ideas. But let me just say something else. If you resort to name calling, it means you're bankrupt. Your worldview is bankrupt. You have nothing. Let me give you an example of bankrupt worldview. Hamas invades Israel and slaughters 3,000 people and does it in the most atrocious way, sexually attacking women, cutting off their breasts, abusing them in all kinds of ways, gang rapes, murdering children. We can't even discuss what took place on that day. It was disgusting, and it was unprovoked. It was cowardly. And then you see on the news some pictures of some children starving, which is atrocious. God forbid that should ever happen. But when you blame Israel for starving children in Gaza, you are an idiot who simply does not even take the time to look at what's going on. Hamas continues to steal aid. They steal food. They've been doing this. How do you think Hamas built the tunnels that they built from all the aid that was coming into the country that was for the people? It didn't go to the people. It went to build tunnels to attack Israel and destroy Israel because they have a demonic hatred for the Israeli people. So when you see these trucks coming in that have been taken over by Hamas, and they're literally knocking people off the trucks and abusing their own citizens, and there's people starving on the streets, and then you blame Israel for that, your worldview is just not very well thought through. And when you see global leaders now who are calling for a two-state solution, acknowledging Hamas, basically, and allowing and demanding that Jerusalem be their capital, number one, you don't understand history. Number two, you don't understand the geopolitical issues going on over there. Number three, you just don't understand outright evil and wickedness. And so this is another sanctity of life issue. There's some of these folks that have been, the latest that came out is Hamas themselves releasing a video showing a young man who's digging a tunnel right now that he's assuming is going to be his own grave. He's been 666 days, this guy has been in captivity. He's skin and bones. He's being systematically starved to death. He's been given a can of beans, one can of beans for 2 days, every 2 days. He looks like somebody from an Auschwitz concentration camp. And this is what Hamas is putting out to convince the world that we need to submit to their demands. Hamas, I want to just be really, really clear. Hamas should be absolutely destroyed. Every single one of them should be wiped off the planet Earth and sent to eternity. This is disgusting, and to in any way sympathize with this from a biblical Christian worldview is pathetic. And so for those of you that have been, reaching out, calling, that somehow Donald Trump's the mastermind behind all of this terrible stuff, or Benjamin Netanyahu or whatever, you just got to educate yourself because you're not getting the facts straight. This is a humanitarian crisis that is absolutely caused by Hamas and by the evil that they're perpetrating. So just want to be clear to our listeners on my view on that particular issue. But anyway, I just get irritated because I have been to Israel. I have toured Israel. I've met with leaders from Israel's defense. I've met with former folks, again, who have fought in that country. I've watched their humanitarian efforts. I've seen the blessing in that country, and I've seen all the money that even Israel has sent to the Palestinians to help. And then I've seen the hate and the propaganda and all the way that they spin the media and the way that they infiltrate our university campuses. And once again, I'll just say this because we're running out of time. We had a couple other major issues I know we wanted to deal with today, but maybe we'll get to them I think on this issue of the sanctity of life, we've got to keep our eyes open because it's being attacked everywhere. Last thing I want to talk about was the New York Times came out with an editorial asking that we rethink the definition of death, and I wanted to highlight this just very quickly in the time that we have left. Death has always been medically defined. It says here, the New York Times just argued for a wider definition of death. Here's why: to allow for organ harvesting. So this makes it even more sinister and sick that the reason they're wanting to expand and move from a biological determination of death to a philosophical determination of death is so that they can harvest people's organs when they're in a better state, I guess. It says here, secular ethicists argue for euthanasia based on personhood theory. The concept of personhood was first explicitly proposed in 1968 by a group of 13 medical doctors and professors who met at Harvard Medical School. They offered what came to be called the Harvard criteria for establishing when a person has died. And they switched it from biology to philosophy. So, for instance, a biological definition would have been you're dead when your heart cannot be restarted, or when you can no longer breathe, or when your cells die. But when you suffer a loss of personhood, that's what so not the biological things, but the loss of personhood. Now, personhood is basically like if you're limited in any way from functioning as a human being, then it goes on. We don't have time to get into all of this here. But basically, the summary of this is essentially a patient is no longer a person when the attending physician says so. So imagine a sick world in which somebody needs your kidney or your liver or your pancreas or whatever it is, your lung, and we decide that because maybe you're mentally incapacitated because of a stroke or something like that, but your body's pretty healthy, that we could call you dead and we can harvest all your organs. So again, we're not talking about biologically dead. We're talking about some group of physicians determines that your standard of living, your personhood, is no longer able to be expressed. So when you see the New York Times basically talking like true Nazis, not like the Sweeney. What's her first name? Sydney Sweeney.
Oh, yeah. Right.
She's not a Nazi, but the New York Times, they might be Nazis. So we need to maybe look more into the right source of this. I mean, this is just sick. And when it's rooted in the fact of this idea, why do we want to harvest organs? Because we want to hold on to life as long as we possibly can. So it goes back to the fear of death, no confident view of your future, right? No sense of eternity or being with the Lord. If you are a secularist, all you care about is living as long as you can possibly live. And if you have to take somebody's organs so that you or your friend or family or loved one can live a month longer or a year longer, then you will resort to that kind of sickness. Because at the end of the day, right, it's all about worshiping me. My life, my comfort, my future, and if I have to suck out your organs so that I can live an extra year, then I'll do it. I mean, this is what we're fighting for on this podcast and as Christians and the biblical worldview. The sanctity of life matters. And as I saw a secularist say recently, in fact, I got this from Nancy Pearcey's website, an atheist was admitting that the only basis for human rights was from the Christian worldview, and that we argue for human rights now, but we stole it from the Christians, even though we don't believe in their God or in the source.
Some honesty there.
But we stole that idea because it works well for us.
Yeah.
But these are the kind of things that only a Christian worldview provides. The foundation for human rights, the foundation for human decency, the foundation for the sanctity of life. And when all these things go, it goes back to pure, raw power. Yeah. And we've highlighted that well today, I think. So let me just mention one other thing as we wrap up this podcast today. Some of you have been have been seeing on social media that the Flashpoint ministry has been promoting Living Stones as well as all their future sites. We have the privilege of hosting Gene Bailey and the Flashpoint Army, as they are called, an army of intercessors, on October 2nd and 3rd. That's a Thursday and Friday. Thursday night, 7 o'clock. Friday night, 7 o'clock. I know that for sure. I think I got wind in talking with some of the folks there, although they've been really, really busy recently. By the way, we should have more information, details on this by the end of this month. But I think there's going to be a Friday morning session as well, which I'm really, really excited about. So make sure you go on our webpage or on our social media page and register for this event. From what I understand, I think we're over the 500 mark, and we're months out. So that's about half the capacity that we have, just a little under a half capacity. So make sure, if you're listening to us and you love this podcast, you're going to love the Flashpoint event, because they are speaking.
Are you going to be part of that?
I am going to be part of that. Yeah, I don't know to the extent I'm going to be part of that, but I know on the Thursday night is more of a political commentary from a biblical worldview.
Yeah.
And I know I'll be a part of it on that day. I'm not sure what Friday night looks like, but I appreciate Gene and what they're doing, and just honored to be able to host and promote what they're doing here in Crown Point and in the Chicagoland area. So you don't just have to be a Living Stoner. You can be coming from all over to be a part of this great event. So more on that coming. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hope you've enjoyed the podcast today, and we look forward to being with you next week.